Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sam Beast YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining us today for another webinar in our hardware asset management series. And today our focus is on your hardware refresh strategy. How you can build your hardware refresh strategy, what the hardware refreshing actually entails, what you need to do from an ITAM standpoint, and how you can make it super successful for your users. Before we start, as always, please do not forget to like and subscribe. We've been growing a huge amount over the past few months, and it's massively appreciated. And yeah, come and join us for the journey. We've got our big interview scheduled for next week, loads of ITAM content coming over the rest of this year and next year as well. So hit that little red subscribe button, give this video a like, and join us on the journey as we delve into all things IT asset management. So first of all, let's start off with a terribly AI generated image of an older looking me, I'm sure you'd agree, giving a very excited stakeholder a laptop at Sam Beast Consulting. I wish I had a big office like that. But what is a hardware refresh strategy? Well, first of all, hardware assets have a defined life cycle, aka how long they will be used within your organization. The hardware refresh strategy defines how and when you're going to look to refresh these end-of-life assets, aka when they've reached the end of their useful life within your organization. As part of your internal life cycle dates, you then want to replace that fleet for newer fleet. That's your hardware refresh. It's literally a case of this device has reached its scheduled retirement date, aka end of its useful life that you've determined within your organization, and you need to swap it out for a new one to start the process all over again. It really is as clear and as simple as that. However, this is quite a big process, a logistical process and just a general process in itself. And it involves some key stakeholders, including ITAM, finance, procurement, local IT tech support teams, service desk teams, and also your ITAM leadership, your ITAM senior management sponsor, your senior leadership teams, your VPs, your CEOs, whomever you go to get some ITAM help and support, and also some money in order to be able to do this. So this honestly is one of my most favourite parts of an IT asset management function, because it entails a lot of different actions that relate to other processes. You've got the whole planning phase, you've then got the procurement phase, you've got the deploy phase, you've got the reclaiming the old device, giving out the new one, and then the ITAD. So you're basically in one process, your hardware refresh process, you are touching basically the whole life cycle of the asset. When you think about it, you've got an asset, you're replacing it, you're buying a new one, you're doing all the onboarding stuff with the new one, you're doing all of the end of life stuff with the old one. So together, if you flip them around with all the new stuff for the new one, or the old stuff for the end stuff for the old ones, you've got the whole life cycle in there. So I really do enjoy doing this one if you've got the budget. It's a bit harder when you don't have the budget. And hopefully as we go through this webinar today, you'll also see why it's super interesting and cool. The final thing, and a very important thing to touch upon, is that you also need to consider the user impact. It's so easy for us in ITAM to just go ahead and you need to refresh your device, end of, it's non-compliant with our lifecycle standards. We need to refresh it. You need to bring it back in. I don't care if you're busy, blah, blah, blah. You really do need to consider the user impact, because it may be a non-technical user that you're refreshing that device for. It's not just a laptop, it could be a phone, it could be a tablet, it could be a desktop, it could be a monitor, and it could even be infrastructure stuff, but we'll touch upon that in a second. But for the end user stuff, please do consider their own circumstances and situation. They may not be a techie, they may be in a completely different department within the organization that, they're not up to speed with the latest technology. Things may be in a different place, etc. They may love their current device because they know how to use it and it works. So just consider that, and also consider if they are going through a busy time and could do without having to migrate to a new device. If it is an end user based asset, just take that into consideration before you stamp your foot and say no, you must come and return this device ASAP. It's nice to be nice. So groundwork, this is when we are going to be defining our asset's life cycle, and all of the asset types have different life cycle dates. They have different time periods depending on even down to what the make and model is, but what the asset type is, that's where the clear differences are. Examples: laptops, 3 to 4 years typically. It can stretch to 5 years if you really are sweating those assets, but the typical useful life of an asset is 3 to 4 years. it used to be a lot shorter because technology evolved a lot, and the older devices you start to see looked old. You even think about cars nowadays, right? Back when I was learning to drive in 2008, 2009, a 10-year-old car then from 1998, 1999 seemed so unbelievably old. And back then, laptops were the same as well. If you had a 3-year-old laptop in 2006, a 2003 laptop, it would be chunkier, it'd be slower. You'd always have to refresh the devices. Personally, for me as well, because the Football Manager games would not run on a device when it got to a certain age, so you always had to refresh them. And in the corporate world, it was the same. It was typically by the end of that 3 years, that laptop was struggling. Nowadays, they're a lot better, they're a lot more durable, they're a lot better looking. It's less obvious which devices are older unless you're in the know, and you know that like a Lenovo T470 is old, or an X1 Carbon 6th gen, or the MacBook Air 2020 version, for example. Unless you're in the know, a lot of the devices now, as I look around, they still look all right. So you can extend that out to 5 years, but you do start to see them struggling with battery life and general performance after that 3 to 4 year period. Desktops, much longer lifespan, 5 years. You can even try 7 years. Desktops has changed, very little compared to the laptop side of things. Even the way they look, the size of them, and you can do a lot more with desktops as well. If something's running slowly, you can put more RAM in it. You can upgrade the SSD, change the graphics card, etc. So 5 years is a base, but you can, of course, if you so wish to, you can increase that up to 7 years as well. Mobiles and tablets are typically 2 years. This is just based on device leasing models. And even in personal life, people normally have a 24-month contract. So then you refresh it and you get a new device. Same within the corporate world. Mobile phones do change a lot more, and they are visibly different as well. You think about the fanfare that Apple do every time they release a new phone. You've also got these other players in the market now with your Google Pixels. They seem to release one every year as well, and it's just that bit better that does make you kind of want to upgrade and pay more. Same on the tablet side of things. iPads, new iPads coming out, Galaxy Books coming out. You've also got other vendors as well that are entering into that kind of corporate landscape simply because the tech is really good and the price point is really good. People like OnePlus, for example, I see more requests coming in from end users for OnePlus devices with certain clients because they're used to using them. And spoiler alert, I have a OnePlus tablet as well, and I think it's brilliant. Fraction of the cost of an iPad, and it's really good. But we digress on that one. But yeah, mobiles and tablets, typically a 2 year lifespan. Monitors can be 5 years. Again, you can push this out to 7 years, but sometimes you do start seeing dead pixels on the screen. The colors aren't quite there. Connections as well between the laptop and the monitor, or the desktop and the monitor, can also get a bit fiddly and a bit, temperamental. They don't quite work first time, or, the screen starts flickering, etc. But 5 years is kind of the standard that we like to implement. Network assets, 5 years as well. You're talking about your switches, routers, firewalls. The wireless connectors, your VLANs, etc. 5 years is a good starting point. Again, if you've got device leasing with people like Cisco or Palo Alto, it's typically a 5 year lifespan for those as well. Some devices are 3 years because they've got a high refresh rate, such as like your routers, but 5 years is good enough. 5 years is okay. But again, then you're starting to get to a point where technology's moved on. It might be time for a refresh on that one. Server and infrastructure assets, 5 to 7 years. This one is, again, a bit more religious simply because of the fact that they are quite expensive to replace and they are critical to an organization. So if there is any downtime, it's a big effort. It's a lot of effort. It has to be typically done on a weekend if you're refreshing certain servers. You're decommissioning them, you're turning them off, you're making sure everything's moved over to the new one, plugging it in. Nowadays things are planned out pretty well, but you do hear horror stories when it doesn't go well. Something doesn't work, and if you're in like retail or something public facing, then suddenly you're on the news on a Monday because people can't check their bags in at the airport, or they can't make a payment, or your website's down, something like that. If it's an on-premise infrastructure, then yeah, it requires a lot more effort and a lot more thought put into it. But 5 to 7 years for those ones. Some people even have servers that are even longer than that. And that's simply because it runs a specific function or a specific application. It's off the network. They don't want to touch it because they fear it might break. And yeah, I've seen 10 plus servers out there. Miscellaneous MISC stuff, so headsets, keyboards, mice, whatever you've classified as a MISC. This could also be things like the Apple pens and stuff like that. Typically 3 years. Don't really concentrate on these ones too much, to be honest. If a headset breaks or anything in MISC breaks, as I look around for my headset, then yeah, just replace it, unless they are these super duper really expensive ones. Actually, some things that have been entering into the world, you can also include in this, like drones. If your organization uses drones, the Vision Pros and stuff like that, you can put that in there. That will require asset tagging and managing as an asset rather than MISC, though, to be honest. And as we mentioned, we've seen some exceptions where they're just running until it breaks. It's got a specific job. It does that job really well. The organization doesn't want to move it, doesn't want to touch it for fear of it breaking or a service going down. So they just run it, basically. It may be off the network, like I said. It may be something that is running a particular application that is no longer available. But it's safe, it's secure, it does the job. No need to replace it. Just mark these exceptions in your asset management database so that when you do come to look at your hardware refresh planning, you're not going, this device is 10 years old, we probably should be replacing this, so that you know why. So that when it comes to it, you're just excluding that one from your refresh planning. So what information do you need from your asset management database to build your refresh plan? And it's a good job that you've been focusing a lot lately on your AMDB, isn't it? Getting all that information in there, all the life cycle dates, all your costs, etc. Yes, very good job. I'm nodding as if you have been. I really hope you have been, but this is a prime example as to why the AMDB provides such a valuable function within your organization, why it's such a critical tool, and why it should be your central source of truth. I'm a big fan of the AMDB more than the CMDB. I much prefer the AMDB from an ITAM standpoint. That's probably a whole nother video, and someone's probably throwing something at their screen right now going, the CMDB is the golden source. Well, for me, I prefer the AMDB. Come on the channel, let's talk about it. But yeah, you'll need some critical bits of information, critical data sets. First of all, purchase date, when you actually purchase this hardware. Goods received date, this is a nice to have, not critical, but if you've got it, this is when you physically receive the device into your inventory, into your organization. Warranty expiry date, very important. When did the warranty end? How many years out of warranty has it been? Really important when factoring in and building out your hardware refresh plans. Your scheduled retirement date, when you internally have defined that particular asset is due for a hardware refresh. So typically your scheduled retirement date is looking at either your hardware goods received date or your purchase date. And it's adding on a set number of years based on what you've defined for that life cycle. It's taking the purchase date and adding on 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, etc. Other people marry the scheduled retirement date with the warranty expiry date. You may have brought extended warranty. If so, you'll need that date as well, because then that will help define your scheduled retirement date. But yeah, if you've just got a standard 1 year warranty, 3 year warranty, 5 year warranty, whatever it is, you may be looking at the purchase date instead and going, right, that scheduled retirement date, purchase date plus 3 years, plus 5 years, etc. And what I typically do as well is I always put the scheduled retirement date as the end of a month. So if we purchased it in June 2021, it's a 4-year lifespan, then I put it's going to expire, it's due for retirement, due for hardware refresh at the end of June 2025. It just makes it easier to report and looks nicer in the AMDB rather than having it's due to, the 6th of June, it must be refreshed. No, it's not that deep. Nothing major is going to happen, touch wood, between that time period. So just put it to the end of the month. You're also going to need your depreciation effective date. This is so that you can understand if there is any value left in the asset internally. Typically, the answer to this is no. You're typically depreciating this based on your scheduled retirement date anyway. So again, if your scheduled retirement date is a 5-year lifespan, you're probably going to be depreciating this over 5 years, unless you've been advised otherwise by your teams internally. I have seen people where they've got a 4-year laptop lifespan, but they're depreciating it over 3 years. So for that last year, it's basically zeroed. But yeah, work with your teams to understand what your fixed asset register people are doing for the depreciation for the particular models, because it may end up that there's no value in it anyway because it depreciated the year before, or it depreciates at the point when you're doing retirement. If you are going to be refreshing assets that have still got value. They've not been fully depreciated. You do need to let your fixed asset register team know and take that value into account when you're looking to do the end of the life bit and the IT asset disposition. But yeah, super important date is our But yeah, really important to factor in the depreciation and any remaining residual value that you may have for that asset. Let's do some more groundwork then. This is when we're digging deep into our asset management database. We're building reports. We're trying to establish what we need to refresh over the next year, next 2 years, next 3 years, etc. So first of all, I would break this up by asset type and manufacturer. So what I typically like to do and advise clients to do is go, okay, we're going to focus on our Windows devices first of all. Windows devices, laptops, the manufacturers in that. If it's one manufacturer, amazing. If it's not, we're going to do a hardware convention and consolidate that. Go and see one of our other videos from last week when we looked at the hardware convention. But yeah, we're going to look to break it down by asset type or manufacturer. If it's a whole laptop thing and you want to standardize, then find all the laptops. If you're just looking to refresh your HPs, your Dells, or Lenovo's, your Apples, then you can, of course, just look for the manufacturer and do it that way. So first things first, I want to know of any legacy assets that are past their hardware refresh date. So I'm looking for dates that are in the past that have missed previous hardware refreshes. If you find that this is a significant quantity, good luck, you've got some work to do. You've really got to get some budget. You've got to focus on these ones first. But you have a look for any legacy assets that have previously passed their scheduled retirement date. Next up, have a look at the ones that are due to expire right up until the end of the current financial year. Build that into your quantities. I like to have a table where it shows the legacy assets in one line this year, next 3 months as well. You break that year down into certain chunks so that it makes it more manageable. I find it easier to get budget approval as well for that one. So build it down to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, still within the same financial year that you're working on, 9 to 12 months. So break all that down. I would, like I said before, I put this into a table. So I've got all of the legacy stuff. I want to see the overall for that year, and then I'm breaking it down 3 months, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12. Build it that way, makes it way more tangible and also makes it a lot less scary when you're trying to convince your local tech support teams that this is the amount of users that are going to be coming to them giving back their old stuff, and this is the amount of devices you need to give out and prepare. Also helps with budgeting and finance teams to say, look, well, we don't have to buy them all straight away. We can buy the next 3 months, we can buy the 3 to 6 months, etc. So that's a really good place to start in building out what the next year looks like. What I typically like to do as well then is you've got the data anyway, hopefully, is start building out the 2 to 5 year quantities as well. If you've not done this already, it's again makes ITAM look incredible. If you can go, here's what the plan is for this year. Oh, and by the way, this is what you can expect the next year, the year after, etc. Here's our hardware refresh plan for the next 5 years. Here's all the devices that we need to replace. Here's how much it's roughly going to cost. Boom, that is the value of ITAM. No unwanted surprises, no ITAM coming groveling for money because we haven't done this. We've done it, we know exactly what we need to refresh, and then everything new adds on to the end of that. So typically when you buy that new phone, it may actually end up, because it's got the 2-year lifespan, but if you buy a laptop, a desktop, monitors, servers, routers, switches, infrastructure kit, etc., then it adds on to the end of that life cycle. So next year, then they might add into it as being year 5 for your new hardware refresh target, if that makes sense. So as you're moving along the year, those new ones that you've just purchased will get added into the list and come down in the years to say 5 years time, then next year will be 4 years time, etc. Something that I will say is when you're building this out, and for future ITAM people within your organization, or even you personally, if you've never done this before and you go in and you refresh a lot in a year, you're going to have a big hardware refresh again in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years time. So remember that, set your leadership team's expectations that we're spending a lot now, but that does mean the quantities are going to increase in the next 3, 4 years when we hit the refresh for these ones that we've just done. That's something that always seems to trip people up, as they do an amazing job. Get rid of all of the legacy stuff, the backlog, and that financial year. Next year comes, the ones you just purchased last year end up on year 3 or year 4 of the hardware refresh plan, and they panic. They go, how can that be? We've just done it. It's like, yeah, but in 3 years' time, you're going to have to refresh all the ones you've just done. And you did it in big quantities, so you're going to have big quantities again. Just set that expectation, because again, yeah, that is something that always seems to rear its ugly head when you're doing this. So get all of those quantities, even in a spreadsheet is fine. In dashboards within your AMDB is even better, especially when they're live and they keep coming in. You just go boop, export, and send that off and get that sorted out. But yeah, break it down into those chunks, and then you can start getting your budget and also start your planning phase. Next up, you want to be nice, okay? You want to be nice to your stakeholders. You want to be nice to people who are physically involved in this, because let's face it, you as ITAM, probably not physically going to be involved that much in doing this, apart from some of the stuff with the processes, the ordering, maybe the user in contact, the user help, and all that kind of stuff. But the physical building the device, you're not going to be doing it. Physically handing it out, you're not going to be doing it as well. First things first, though, before we can even factor in the human element of it, we need to think about the budget. What budget have we been allocated for this hardware refresh? No point in planning on replacing 10,000 laptops when you've only got budget for 4,000. And that budget also needs to cover your mobile phones, your infrastructure kit, your monitors, etc. Just no point. Set the groundwork, understand how that's going to do. Stakeholder bandwidth, your local tech support teams, your end user teams, what's their bandwidth like? How many could they realistically do in a week, in a month, in 6 months, etc. to do the physical handoff, the physical switch for people, because you don't want to be annoying them and them not being your friends because you're forcing them to do 50 laptop refreshes in a day. Doesn't make any sense. So speak to them and understand what their capabilities are and what their bandwidth is. Have a look at the supply chain availability and delivery times. That's another thing. If it's going to take you 3 months to get this hardware in place, then yeah, you need to know that once you get all of this hardware refreshing done and you place the order, you've still got to wait 3 months. So then things might have changed for stakeholders, things might have changed for your tech support teams. Take that into consideration. And of course, you need to understand the user's availability. People may be going on long-term leave, maternity leave, big projects, they may be traveling. There's all sorts of things. So just, again, going back to that user side of things, take that into consideration and think of the users. Will someone please think of the users when you're doing your hardware refreshing? And finally, senior management support and hardware refresh priorities. These help you understand and prioritize which asset types you should be doing first. It may be that they don't have a priority. Amazing. In that case, ITAM, take your pick. What you're going to do. Laptops first, servers first. It's up to you. However, if senior management are getting it in the neck because the mobile fleet is really old, maybe mobile should be first to help get senior management on ITAM side. If it's the laptop fleet, maybe it should be the laptops. If the monitors are looking tatty and worn and they're getting comments about it, maybe monitors. Speak to your senior management support, your ITAM sponsor, to understand if they have any ITAM hardware refresh priorities. We briefly touched on the budget beforehand, but let's go into this in a bit more detail, because this is a really important bit when building out your hardware refresh. You need to validate your refresh budget per asset type for the next financial year. You may have one big hardware budget that includes infrastructure and end user assets. If so, you're going to need to divvy that out between your different asset types so that you can build what your hardware refresh plan is going to be for those asset types. Again, there's no point if you've got $1 million budget and you've got $1.2 million worth of laptops and you've got $500,000 worth of servers, for example. Just spitballing numbers here. There's no point in putting all your eggs in one basket for the laptops and having servers aged. It's better to split it up by the priorities, and we'll talk about priorities in a second. So yeah, when you understand your budget, how many assets would this cover? How many assets per asset type would this cover? What extra budget would be required to refresh all of your aged assets? This is also really good, even if you don't get the approval. It's good to at least show the senior leadership teams, the budget holders, what is actually required. And then there's no skeletons in the closet. You can go back to them and say, well, you didn't give us enough budget. We've covered 70% of our end of life target this year, for example. And then also start asking them about their plan, going back to the groundwork that we did beforehand, where we're looking at that phase of 2 to 5 years, looking at it every year. What kind of budgets are you looking at for year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, etc.? What would that kind of look like? Let them know that early doors so that they can start planning for that. And again, there's no surprise. You're being super transparent, super upfront here in saying, look, this is what we need now, but this is also what we're going to need in the future based on our current hardware refresh rates. And also check the budget approvals for orders. Is this going to delay any process? If your procurement tool requires a certain level of spend to go through this approval route, which includes the CEO, for example, what kind of delays can we expect in actually being able to place these orders? What's the approval flow look like for that? You may have the budget approved, but then the actual process of getting that order approved, what does that look like? What kind of delays can we expect to happen in there? Again, this is really important to factor in when it comes to the timescales and relying on your local tech support teams to physically do these switches. Don't get them ready and prepared if it takes 6 weeks for hardware to be delivered, but even before that point, it takes 3 weeks for senior management to approve the order. Just understand that when you're doing all the groundwork phase. We're moving on to planning. So we've done the core foundations for our hardware refresh, and we're now moving on to the planning phase. And as I mentioned before, we're looking at this on a per asset type. So don't try and boil the ocean. Focus on one asset type at a time. Otherwise, you are going to struggle massively, and so are your end users, and so are your tech support teams and your infrastructure teams as well. So how are you going to define this? Well, first of all, have a look. Maybe look at what's the most aged asset type by quantity. So by that, I mean the ones the scheduled retirement date's already passed. How many of those do you have for laptops? How many do you have for desktops? How many do you have for monitors, mobiles, infrastructure kit? Which one has the most quantity of aged assets? So if you've got 10 servers that have been aged, but you've got 400 laptops that have been aged, maybe you could actually go for the servers first because there's less of them. You can get that done and then focus on the laptops. Do you see what I mean? Or you could even switch the other way around and say, no, they've got 400 laptops, they are their priority. We need to get those done. It depends on how much you want, like a quick win. I find that with hardware refreshes, if it's the first time you've ever done it, a quick win's a nice thing to have. It could be something as simple as, you've got 5 servers and you replace those. It could be that you want to get rid of Intel MacBooks and there's not that many of them. Great, get that done, shout about it. Then say, next up, we're going to be focusing on the monitors and we've got 100 of these, and then we're going to be doing 250 desktops, then thousands of laptops, that kind of thing. So define which way of the spectrum you want to go on that one. Do you want to go on the one with the most aged assets, or do you want to go on the one with the least aged so you can get some wins under your belt? Also have a look at what asset types causing the most issues or downtime. You can have a look, work with your support teams. You can also have a look at your incidents and your tickets and your requests and stuff like that for assets that are causing problems. Which asset type could be a quick win? We mentioned that one. Which one's quite easy to do? Which one would take less time and effort and would be great PR for the ITAM and your technology or IT functions? And going back to that groundwork that we were doing, if your senior management team have said, no, you must be focusing on this asset type, then you must be focusing on that asset type. If your senior leadership team, if your CEO, your C-levels are saying you've got to focus on this asset type, I would listen to them and focus on that asset type and get on their good side, because they might help you further on down the line with ITAM. And finally, of course, we've already mentioned this, but I keep going back to it because this is something that is a common pitfall: budget. Again, if you don't have the budget to fix all of them, fix the oldest ones first and try and split it out amongst as many asset types as you can, so that you don't then have a huge amount of devices that are due for hardware refresh next year for phones because you spent all your time refreshing your desktops, for example. Think about the phases, okay? Don't do a big bang if there's large quantities. We've said that about boiling the ocean with the asset types. When you split it down by asset types and you see the quantities per asset type, it may be a lot. So think about the planning phases and doing it in this way. Consider the quantities per hardware that you need to refresh per asset type. Locations is another really interesting thing to consider. I'm thinking about the number of local tech support teams that can help with you, help you with the physical switches, etc. I'm also then going to be thinking about the availability of this hardware. How quickly can it come? How quickly can we get it sent to that particular location? We mentioned it's nice to be nice. Think about the guys on the ground or girls who are actually doing this hardware refreshing, what their bandwidth is like. And again, the priorities that have been set to you from an ITAM standpoint. Whether this is prioritize on laptops or just prioritize on oldest first, whatever that is. Build this out in phases. It does not have to be one big bang. You're going to do all the asset types. You've got the budget. You're going to do it all. You're going to do it all straight away. No, focus on the oldest ones first once you've got that budget. Do batches of 50 a month, say, for example, per location, if that's achievable. Work with your tech support team so that you can understand how big these phases can be and how many phases you'll need over the next year. It may even be like 12 phases, one a month. But break it down so it makes it less scary for you and less scary for them. This is a very important thing that I always see overlooked. I don't know why. People forget about your stock. When building hardware refresh plans, people always go into the AMDB, go boom, in use, export, here's what we need to refresh, without looking at the stock that's available. Please, 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 have a look at what you've got in your AMDB in stock. Do a physical stock audit. Look for those ones that are still in life. They're not pending disposal. They're not, pending repairs, etc. Or if they are pending repairs, they actually are going to get repaired and put back into stock or back out into the wild. Please add these numbers into your refresh. Look at them. When are they due for retirement? How many of them do you also want to refresh? If you're changing manufacturer, organizations like to shift all of their stock to the new manufacturer as well. If you're doing a gradual approach, you may want to keep a couple back for emergency situations or loaner devices, but please, just in your AMDB, just go and check the in-stock filter, the in-stock state, and see what assets need to be refreshed, because this always gets missed. I don't know how. And then I'm like the bad guy going, sorry guys, but you've got over 120 laptops in stock, 150 phones or whatever that you've not taken into account that are due for a refresh. It's going to cost you X $100,000 to add those in. It's like, what? Why didn't you tell me? Like, well, you guys didn't add in your stock levels, unfortunately. You just ignored them. Don't ignore them, please. Technical requirements. As you can see on the right hand side, we have our lovely user profiles, and this is really important to do when you are building out your hardware refresh plan. You may already have user profiles within your organization from a licensing standpoint. They get certain Microsoft products, Adobe products, CAD products, CRM tools, etc. So you can maybe piggyback off those ones to build out your user profiles for your end user based assets. We're typically here looking at things like screen size, RAM requirements, SSD requirements, graphics card, battery life, mobility as well. This is a really interesting one that seems to be becoming more and more of a thing lately, is that people now, since what happened in 2020 and the germs and stuff like that, that now people are getting back out into the office. They're back out on sales calls, traveling around a lot. The whole weight becomes a thing again. The whole screen size, external keyboards becomes a thing, and people like 2-in-1 devices now. Especially sales guys that are doing presentations, but. Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. I think that you really need to go back to that hardware convention video that we done last week in identifying your user profiles when building out your hardware refresh. Hopefully you've already got them, building out the profiles, building out your convention. And it may be then that sales teams can get a tablet version, whereas your CAD team get the big, meaty, lots of RAM, lots of processing power, lots of great graphics cards. And same for your creative teams, right, to run the Adobe Creative Cloud. And I know social media teams now as well, they need new kit because they need to take amazing pictures of something and videos of something else. And I'm not a social media fan, but they need some good kit and some good software. Which again, when building these user profiles, if you've not already done so, you think about any specialist software that the hardware needs to support, and then that will build out your user profiles to say, right, this group needs this model with this spec, this screen size, etc. This group needs a standard laptop, that's fine, they don't need anything fancy. This group need the tablet, the 2-in-1s, because they're moving around a lot, etc. And over here we've got these guys who have specialist software. They need the same amount of RAM and SSD, etc. as your CAD guys, but because of the looking at different color patterns or something like that, they need a bigger screen size with more resolution. And they also need more RAM because some of the software they're running requires a ridiculous amount of RAM. So think about the technical requirements, do your homework. all of this planning really does pay off, not only for you from an ITAM standpoint, but then also from a user experience standpoint as well. So have a look at that, build out your technical requirements, build out your profiles, because then that will translate into the models that you buy further down the road. You may even look at just profiling people based on teams. I've seen that happen as well, where it's go, right, okay, well, finance, procurement, HR, people that are not really heavy users of like serious software, they can just get by with a standard device. You then have like a certain like VP or VP or what's the other one I'm looking for? You've then got another level of like your C levels and your VPs that get a different model altogether. You've then got your creatives that have a model. You've got your CAD teams that have a model. It all depends on how you build out these user profiles. Just make sure you do it in your planning phase if you haven't done already, so that you know what hardware you're going to be buying as part of the refresh, and that the user gets a device that they can carry on doing their day-to-day jobs. In the infrastructure and the network side of things, this is where you're going to be heavily relying on your asset type owners to help support you with the required specs. This is twofold, right? The first line here says potential opportunity to reduce the specs because of cloud migration. Seen this happening a lot, where they're actually reducing the number of servers because they've got a cloud-first mentality. The on-premise servers, they can actually be reduced a lot because the high-powered, high-spec devices are in the cloud. However, there's also the chance in the infrastructure space that you need to increase your hardware spec, which will actually cost more money. You need more ports, you need more RAM, you need more storage, you need more features and functionalities. That can also happen too. That's not probably on your bingo card when doing hardware refreshing, but it's definitely something that you need to speak to when you go to your asset type owners and understand what they need moving forward, because technology is moving a lot in that space, right? People are either moving to the cloud and reducing their spec, or they're actually getting things back on premise, so they're increasing their hardware requirements and the hardware spec that they need. But that requires more money. It's not just a standard hardware refresh. You may be refreshing a much lower level grade of piece of hardware with less spec for something that's a lot more meaty and beefy. Also, the physical size, another thing that seems to be cropping up a lot. Oh, the rack space. We need more rack space because we've got more kit coming in. Actually, we need less rack space now because we've refreshed for smaller devices. Also, even things like switches, routers, firewalls, etc. The placement of them, the model may have changed slightly. The dimensions may have changed slightly, and therefore brackets and mounts and stuff like that previously worked don't work. Had that before with routers in particular, where we've got upgraded a model. The new model's amazing and great, but then all the brackets that we had that were on ceilings and stuff like that no longer worked. So think about the physical size and how you need to accommodate for that with any brackets or accessories and stuff like that. And if you are in the infrastructure space, again, something that we're seeing a lot of clients move down the route of is leasing models for infrastructure kit. If you're in a big project, or a project's about to end and you will no longer need stuff of a higher spec, or in the future you're going to need stuff with a higher spec and there's no other options for it, you don't want to buy it, then consider the leasing model. Again, a lot of organizations like Cisco, Palo Alto, etc. in that space, can even do a device leasing for physical servers as well. May be an option for you and may bring a whole new dynamic to your hardware refresh plan. Have a think, speak to your asset type owners. So now we're moving into the execution phase. So we've done all of that groundwork. We've built up our user profiles. We know the makes, the models, the specs of everything that we need. Senior management are in support of what we want to do. We know the quantities. We've got our target list, etc. Now it's the time to start ordering stuff. Are we going to be doing this in one big batch, or are we going to break it up into our, like we said before, that 3 month, 0 to 3 months? Actually, sorry, no, starting off with the stuff that's legacy, that's already retired. 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months. I sound like baby clothes here. 6 to 9 months, 9 to 12 months. Are we going to break it up in batches like that? As we mentioned in the hardware convention video, we've already price locked our stuff anyway. You should watch that video as well as this one because they are very related. But yeah, we should be price locking, so it shouldn't really matter too much. It just depends on the supply chain. Please do consider when warranties are activated if you are buying them in a big bunch, but you know that you're not going to get around to loads of devices for another 3 to 6 months. You may lose 3 to 6 months worth of warranty on that one, and depreciation and general life cycle management of that device. Some devices, the warranty does not kick in until you physically get it shipped to you. You could have it holding, you could order it, but still hold it in the hardware vendor's warehouse or a third-party warehouse. But if it's shipped to you, that typically is when the warranty is kicked in. So you could have assets sat there in their box depreciating with warranties full-blown. Direct purchasing or partners for specific countries or sites. Again, if you're looking at a global hardware refresh, you may be able to order directly with the hardware vendor. You may need to go through a value-added reseller. You may even need to go through another reseller as well, or a distributor within certain countries where they've got import and export laws, or just governmental laws where they just do not let you import or buy anything outside of their country. So have a think about that. How's that going to work? Do you need people to order the hardware for you in different countries and recharge it back to a central budget? Things to consider, things to take into account. Supply chain lead times, we've already mentioned this one, but we'll mention it again because this catches people out. Vendors typically give you like a window, 4 to 6 weeks, 5 to 7 weeks, 4 weeks on the dot, etc. Understand what they are. Understand if there's anything that could increase that time frame, because again, that could really hinder your hardware refresh planning. Where do you want this? Where do you want the shipping to go? Do you want it to go to your offices, directly to the user, third-party warehouse? Need to figure all of that out. If you've got a third-party warehouse, they may also do the imaging and asset tagging for you and deploy all of the software that you need, and then you can ship it straight to the user. Or you've got the service with the hardware provider itself or the third party where they'll do the imaging and tagging as well, so you can ship it straight to the end user. Or you're going to need to ship it to your local offices so that they can image it, tag it, and install all the software. Depends on how your organization looks. Again, go through that internal approval flows. We've said that about the budget. We need to understand what that looks like for the spend. How long is that going to take? That's why putting it into batches may actually be more beneficial to you, because it's under a certain spend threshold. Get approved easier. Order goes out the door quicker. Hardware comes in easier. Rather than going and putting in a $1.2 million order that's to go to the CEO, you could put in a $199,000 order that only needs to go to a VP who you're very, you get on really well with, and you've done a lot for him, so he can just go and, come on, go and approve it so we can get this hardware. Whereas, if it's over certain thresholds, you might have a lot more approval flows. And finally, again, something that seems to catch a lot of people out, if it's a new vendor or a new supplier, a new reseller, it's not set up in the procurement tool. You get all of the quotes, you're amazing, we can't wait to work with you, we can't wait to get this new hardware, and then you go, oh, they're not in our procurement tool. I can't do this order because now I've got to onboard them in the procurement tool. That's going to add on another week or so, and it happens way more frequently than you'd think. So make sure that the hardware vendor, the reseller, is onboarded within your procurement tool before you actually go ahead and order. So you've done the order, it's all been approved, the hardware's coming to you now. First of all, when you receive the equipment or your third party receives the equipment, you need to validate that what you've ordered is what's been delivered. Simple goods receive process. What you order, what's been delivered. Any dead on arrival assets, if so, get that sorted. You need to get devices that actually work. If anything's dead on arrival, it should be covered under warranty. You should be able to just go and get a replacement straight away. Again, though, if you're not opening them all, you may struggle with this one, but when you do come to open it, you can still usually get that sorted out and fixed. So check for that. And of course, you need to do the AMDB updates. This needs to be done when you've received it. Some people even do this when they receive the shipping notification, but you need to do the AMDB updates. I'm talking serial numbers, models, costs, PO information, vendor information, asset tag, your key lifecycle dates of warranty, scheduled retirement, depreciation dates, states, sub-states, and of course stock rooms where you're going to be holding them. Even go one step further, you can even reserve assets for the people that you're replacing it for in your AMDB, so that it's really easy for tech support to do if you want to take it to the next level. But that is also another option for you. So AMDB updates are in yellow. It's so important to do. Please do not forget to do this, because if you forget to do this now, you've already started off on the wrong foot with this new hardware that you've got in. So get it done as soon as you receive this equipment or when you've been sent the dispatch notice. And then it's basically, once you've received them, you've got the AMDB updated stock room management, really, until you're ready to start doing that hardware refresh and preparing that stock for your end users. Speaking of our end users, the next step is to get the communication out to them. Typically, we do this in an email format. Here is an AI generated email template that has got a spelling mistake in it. I'll let you see if you can spot that one. But yeah, this is typically, we contact all of the users. We tell them that their laptop is ready for retirement, and then we need to give them a new one. We give them instructions to make sure that any of their files and folders are in the cloud, whichever cloud provider is of choice for you. Because we do not allow users to take their old device and their new device at the same time. It should be that when they're retiring a device, we get the old one back and they get distributed with the new one. Give them a slot, give them a location, give them the expectation on how long this is going to take. If they've got specialist software that you need to install, then you may actually need them for longer. But yeah, just give them the expectation of how long it's going to take when they actually physically come to do the hardware refresh. You can actually automate this email as well if you've got workflows in your asset management database, or you've got certain additional tools that you've plugged on. You can automate this so that it creates a ticket for your local tech support teams. It sends out the email, and you can allocate that asset to the new user within the AMDB. I mean, that's peak ITAD maturity to be able to do that. So we've got the comms out, we've got the hardware in. Next up, we need to prepare the assets that we're giving out. So that's asset tag, relevant image, software licenses that are deployed. Additional accessories is typically for your end user based assets, so like a screen protector, a case, a laptop case, a privacy screen, whatever else accessories that you provide to the user. Racking location is established. This is for your infrastructure and network assets, where it's physically going to go. SIM cards and mobile numbers for your mobiles and tablets. That's something, again, that's often overlooked. You get the handset in and then don't have the SIM card ready. We got to request more SIM cards from our mobile carrier. Also, make sure that you're not only preparing the physical asset, but any hardware ownership forms that you do, any IT policies that you need to sign as well, like your hardware usage policy. We typically like to suggest and implement hardware ownership forms so that when someone comes and collects a device, they sign it. They basically sign and say they'll look after it, they're responsible for it throughout the life cycle. And then when they return it, they can sign it again to say that it's been returned. There's two separate areas on the form. And then they also sign the hardware usage policy to say that they use it for work purposes. It's not for personal use. They'll look after it, keep it secure, etc. So make sure you've got those ready for signing, either digitally or physically as well. All part of the asset preparation, physical asset itself, but then also the user policies and forms that they need to sign. So now we've got to the stage where we're ready for the physical refresh itself. So this is when we're making sure that we're getting the old asset back. We also want all the power cables that are associated for that asset as well, whether it's an infrastructure asset, end user based asset, phone, tablet, monitor, whatever. We need the cables back because that then influences the value in IT asset disposition. If you give them back just the device itself, just the laptop, no cables, and straight away they've got an excuse to give you less money because you haven't given them a cable, and they're going to need the power cables to then go and set it on. So get all of the cables and stuff like that back. Ensure the user logs in when they're physically there doing the refresh and validates that all of their access and software is available on the new device. If there's any software that's license key locked, serial number locked, you'll need both devices to deallocate it from the old one to then redeploy that license to the new device as part of the handover. Please make sure that you do that. You've done that as part of your planning phase to understand any niche software that are there. And as the ITAM team, you'll know which software requires a license lock to it. A lot of stuff now is SaaS-based, it's portals, it's user-based. They can just log into the old device, and you may just need to, and their trusted device list is maybe remove the old device in the portal. And make sure that when you do this handover that they sign the acceptable use policy or the hardware ownership policies, whatever forms you have to say that you've given this device out, this is the new user and they'll look after it. You really do need to make sure that you're handing that over, that they are signing it. Do not let them take it without that, because that is a good auditable document that shows that you've given this away to them. They agree to the terms of service and what the policies that you're dictating is a strong word. The policies that you've defined that they're to follow. And then you can, if there's any breach of that policy, then you've read them, you've understood them, you've signed it. At this point now, we get to the asset management database updates. Again, we've already said that when you receive the equipment, it's really important, but now you've actually deployed the equipment, it's even more important. So with the new asset, there's two assets here that you're going to have to update. First is the new one. So we're looking at getting the assigned user, the location, which is typically driven by the user profile, updated state, support group, asset tag infos in there, etc. You've already got all the lifecycle dates in there from before. So now this is just the next step in making sure that the asset is reflected to the user that you've given it out to. And then on the old asset, we need to update the state, the sub-state, remove the assigned user, assign the stock room, and update the lifecycle stage status. This will typically be in stock pending disposal, as it is a device that you are going to be disposing of because you've hardware refreshed it. And the lifecycle stage is going to be end of life or end of operation, depending on what you've defined as your lifecycle stage statuses. So two really important asset management database updates there. The new asset and the old asset both need to be done as in real time as possible. Don't leave this to, I'll do them all in the evening and you'll never get around to doing it. That old device will remain in use and assigned to the person that's got the new device. They'll have two laptops. The old laptop's going to end up on all sorts of audit lists. So please try and do it when you get the device back and give out the new one. So post refresh, we mentioned earlier that not all of these users are going to be IT savvy. So there's a level of hypercare that we need to provide here. This is when the support teams provide proactive support and monitoring once the new user has the hardware to ensure a smooth hardware refresh and that the user is fully up to speed with their new device. In the infrastructure space, this is just checking that it's doing what it should be doing. It's not going down. All of the services that are on that device are running okay, or the internet's fine, or the firewall's working, the switches, routers, etc. all working okay. You can monitor this using network monitoring tools. But with end user based devices, it could be as simple as, the user doesn't understand where a certain button's moved to, where certain software that's used to be a desktop icon is no longer a desktop icon, that kind of thing. Really think about those users that are not tech savvy and provide that level of hypercare to them so that they're fully comfortable and happy with their new device. With the old device, though, we now go to the retirement and the ITAD process. So we need to fully decommission and retire assets that have been returned as part of this hardware refresh, making sure that all of the licenses that are on the devices have been reclaimed and removed. We've updated the AMDB so that it reflects the updated state and substate and lifecycle stage status. We're then arranging an ITAD collection. So if you're doing hardware refreshes, it's likely that you're going to be needing ITAD collections every month, depending on the size of your stock rooms and where you can store the assets. But yeah, you're going to be arranging ITAD collections. Then hopefully we're going into the ITAD process and we're going to be making some money off of these, hopefully through resale. But of course, if they can't be resold, then we need to go through the disposal, data destruction processes, get all of those data destruction references, certificates, etc., and add those into the asset management database. And like we said, if required, if you do have really old stock, then why not just use one of the assets that you've got back? If something that you've reclaimed as part of this hardware refresh process is in better condition than your stock or your loan devices, then put the loan devices in stock in for retirement and ITAD and use the better condition ones as your loaners or your emergency stock. But you see now how it's gone the whole life cycle. We've gone from procurement and planning for the new assets all the way through the deployment and the hypercare and the BAU right through to the retirement and ITAD of the old assets that you've reclaimed. And then you start the whole cycle again. So it's a never-ending cycle, is hardware refreshing. You've just done this for all of your laptops. Now you're going to need to look at phones, tablets, monitors, desktops, servers, whatever is still on your target list. It's a never-ending cycle. You'll always have new targets, new asset types, new models to at least invest in refreshing, at least have a look at what you need to be doing, what you need to be spending money on, etc. It may even be, like we said earlier, that you've got Intel MacBooks, you need to move them to the M chipset. It could be something as simple as that. You've got 13-inch device, you need to move them to 14 inches. You've got legacy phones that you need to upgrade. It's a never-ending cycle. Always look at ways to improve. What did you learn from the last refresh? What can be done better? What can reduce the stress or the user impact when you've refreshed stuff? Understand that so that you can then update your process flows, your work instructions, your SOPs, your races, etc., to reflect the reality. What works well, what didn't work, what are you going to try next time, so that you can update your documentation, your processes. Everything is a learning opportunity, and hardware refresh planning and hardware refresh strategies and processes is no exception to that. What works well, what didn't work, so that you can update your documentation and try again next time and keep evolving it. What works again, what didn't work, what do we need to consider for this particular asset type that we didn't need to consider beforehand for mobile phones, for example. So in summary, I honestly would suggest that you do a lot of groundwork and a lot of planning to get your hardware refresh strategy and your process right. It requires working within certain budgets and stock levels as well. Do not forget about that, because you may want to refresh everything, but you physically can't because you don't have the money. Lots of communication with your end users, local IT support, procurement, and all the other stakeholders that are involved. There's no such thing as too much communication. Talk to them, let them know what you're working on, what you're planning on, what the numbers are, what the impact is, etc. Give them regular updates. Do it that way. Make sure that you give the AMDB the attention and the love that it deserves during this process with the old asset and also then with the new assets. And then when you get those assets back, prepare the old assets for ITAD, for extra money that could be actually then used for future hardware budgets or other ITAM initiatives. It all works. The best condition that they can be in with the power cables, the cords, etc. that it came with, you're likely then to get them all money back through ITAD. So that's the hardware refresh planning and strategy. I really hope you found it useful. Next up, we're going to be looking at hardware asset management and green IT. So we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.